of our most precious faculty, our own responsibility. And we cannot abdicate that, and religion asks us to do so.
With all due, Christopher, with the greatest possible respect, Christopher, the Jewish prayer books do, and the Old Testament Jewish prayer books do repeatedly refer to being inscribed in the book of life and not in the book of death. So I think there must be some belief in life after death, but maybe I'm mistaken.
Well, Judaism makes less of the afterlife than Christianity or Islam does, considerably less. And it also, of course, doesn't proselytize as much, or really at all, except among Jews. And it doesn't make the stupid mistake of saying that the Messiah has already arrived, which Christianity does make, and Islam sort of suggests, at least the final revelation has already occurred. At least Maimonides has the grace to say, the Messiah will come, yes, but he may tarry. That I would say that Judaism is superior because it makes a racist sectarian claim that God has revealed himself only to one Bronze Age, greedy, ambitious military tribe. But it is at least a little superior to the stupid Christian and Islamic plagiarisms that have been stolen from Jewish books.
I think you're from that tribe too, Chris. So there's a...
yes, I speak with feeling.
So, but there's a... do
not regard myself as particularly redeemed or marked in my foreskin for a special a revelation or salvation, and I despise anyone who thinks like that. I don't think people should think with their dicks, or their epidermis, or their pudenda, okay? Call me old-fashioned if you like.
Christopher, do you think that there are tens of thousands, if not, I don't know the exact number, but hundreds of thousands of men and women who work in faith in this country? Do you think they're all charlatans and frauds?
No, I don't. I mean, I've met many people who are more, I would consider morally superior to myself, not just in this country but in other countries too, who it's quite clear to me are doing what they do for their faith, which often is, for example, Mormonism, which I consider to be a racket, or Pentecostalism, which I consider to be a delusion, but they're doing it for that reason. However, all over the world and in the United States, I've met people who try and help others for its own sake, not to proselytize for their church, not to proselytize for their faith, not to argue that there are invisible means of support or later means of redemption, but because they are humanists and humanitarians. And I think it's to them that the credit should go. I have to say I suspect those who go as Mormons to work in Bolivia to try and convince ignorant, innocent, needy, desperate people by handouts that Joseph Smith dug up gold plates written by God in upstate New York. I think that's a terrible way to be living your life.
Mormonism is not our topic tonight, but
we've discussed several subjects that are not our topic.
Faith is, though, and if faith is good, that's as good as anyone else's.
Well, let me just say
and as a motive for charitable work, which was the question Comrade Stein asked me, as a motive for charitable and missionary work, it's a notoriously very strong one, is it not? Mormons have to spend a lot of time as missionaries working for others to convince them that an absolute crackpot fantasy is a gift from God.
Let me bring it back to religion and science, if I could, for a moment. This is a question for both of you, and I'll begin with Jay Richards. So the late
crackpot racist fantasy, by the way, since until 1979, no
You're
black,
filibustering here.
No black. Since I was asked, crackpot racist fantasy since till 1979, no black person was admitted by the Mormon Church to have a soul.
Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you back the next time for our discussion about Mormonism and its history. But right now, what I'd like to do is bring it back to religion and science, and I'd like to ask Mr. Richards, and I'd like for Christopher to comment. The late Stephen Jay Gould, a man that Christopher greatly admires, and many of us do, noted that surveys show that almost half of all scientists are religious. So he commented, either half of all my colleagues are enormously stupid, or else the science of Darwinism is fully compatible with conventional religious beliefs and equally compatible with atheism. What is your reaction to that, Mr. Richards, to Gould's observation about science?
Well, I think it's true, and it has been for about 80 years, that if you poll general natural scientists, it's between 40 and 50%. Strangely, the physical sciences and mathematics seem to be a little over 50%. Sociology is down in about 20%. I don't know the significance of that. But that's sort of the spread, and it's been about 50-50 for about 80 years. So I think it's a contradiction, at least, of the certainty of the secularization thesis, which is that the more intelligent people get, the more secular and less religious they get. I do, however, disagree with Gould about Darwinism. I don't think that Darwin's theory of evolution is logically incompatible with theism. It's possible that God created a world in which he set things up in such a way that organisms have a certain type of adaptability that's sort of open source, so that they derive most of their adaptive complexity through a process from the environment. That's sort of the picture that Darwinism would paint. So I don't think Darwinism per se, because it really is simply a description of the complexification of life after you get the origin of life, is fundamentally or sort of logically incompatible with theism. So I think it's really an empirical question of whether organisms are actually built that way, what the explanatory power of Darwinism is, and so forth. Nevertheless, I tend to agree more with Richard Dawkins, who said that Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. He didn't say it proved that God didn't exist or something that strongly. His point was that there are many things in biology that look very strongly to most people, at least intuitively, like they're designed. And Dawkins and many people took the Darwinian revolution to sort of finally establish and vanquish this last area of the natural world from this design intuition. The reality is, though, is that the evidence waxes and wanes. I think there was a time in the 19th century when the case against design was stronger than it was now. At the beginning of the 21st century, when we know the universe had a beginning, and I think we know much more about the limits to the Darwinian mechanism and much more rigorously understand the nature and the aspects of designing, I think we're in a different perspective, both intellectually and philosophically, but also with respect to the evidence. So I wouldn't fully disagree with Gould, but I do say that Darwinism, if it's totalizing explanation, sort of encourages atheism, and that if there's strong evidence for design in biology, that sort of encourages theism. That's how I'd put it.
For your response to Gould's comment.
I should be quick because I've been accused of hogging time up to now. But Sir Isaac Newton, the founder of modern science, believed in alchemy and spent a lot of his time practicing it. The traces in his hair of lead and mercury from alchemical crazy experiments are very heavy, the hair that his descendants kept. He wouldn't take his oath. He was supposed to Cambridge to take an oath to the established church. He wouldn't take it because it meant taking an oath to the Trinity, which he regarded as a vile heresy from the whore of Babylon, the Church of Rome. He wanted to keep all Catholics out of the university. He was a madman when it came to religion. He thought everything in the universe could be inferred from the design of the Temple of Solomon, which he thought he could work out from first principles, that he was the greatest scientist of his day. Alfred Russel Wallace, Darwin's great collaborator and perhaps forerunner, was never happier than at spiritualist seances with ectoplasm. Joseph Priestley, who we think effectively discovered oxygen, believed in the phlogiston theory. Francis Crick, who discovered with James Watson the double helix, thought, as Newton did, that human life probably came to Earth as the sort of semen on the end of the comet's tail, or the meteor's tail. We were seeded from the... his colleague James Watson has recently proved himself to be a pseudo-scientific racist. Pretty shabby record. There is absolutely nothing in science that prevents you from being a crackpot, a racist, a nutbag, an eccentric, a pseudo-scientist as well. That's the way we're made. Not until Albert Einstein does one get pure mind, more or less pure mind, and more or less pure humanism. And even he was very soft on Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union.
Okay, we're getting a lot of good questions from around the country, and so we're going to go to those questions, and also from the audience. And I think, Ben, you have those questions.
I have quite a few questions here. I'll ask you this first, Jay. May I call you Jay?
Yes, please.
What is the purpose of life, and what are we living for?
That again is not the subject of the debate. I don't believe. As has been exposed, I'm a Christian. I'm essentially an evangelical Christian. I happen to like the Westminster Shorter Catechism's answer that the chief end of man, of human beings, is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. I like that. I don't think you're going to discern that from cosmology or from astronomy or from any of this publicly available evidence. I think it's separate. To refer to the previous question, it's a separate question what scientists believe, the scientists, in what the best scientific evidence we have is. That's why I insisted on trying to ground my argument